On today's episode of Watch Time, we're going to be talking about shooting video and photos outdoors. What are some considerations that you should think about prior to hiring your video production professional, or maybe some things that you should talk to them about right after this? Welcome back to Watch Time, everybody.
We're excited to have you back, and we're excited especially that it's this time of year when the weather's getting nicer and the sun is out.
Yes, which also brings us to our topic for today, which is going to be talking about shooting video and photos, because this can kind of apply to both, but outside, because we do get a lot of requests, and we believe that it's great to shoot outdoor content because it does really, establish the location. It's a great way to showcase your facility. But I think that the issue that we run into is people have their thoughts on what it is to shoot outside and how it can be easy. And I think there's a lot more to it than that, and we'll kind of cover that in today's episode.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are a lot of shoots that we do recommend, waiting until the weather's nice. We definitely, want to be doing some filming at this time of year. But like you said, there are some considerations in terms of gear and time of day and everything that we do need to take into consideration. So, I mean, do we want to kind of start off with some of the positives of filming in the spring or summertime?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one positive is it looks really nice. You have greenery if it's summertime. If it's the spring, you have trees that are starting to bloom and just flowers that are popping up, and it's really it's nice. It adds something to the video, especially if you have a product that is something that's being used outdoors, or if you manufacture an item that maybe is going to a company that's going to be used outdoors. I feel like having that footage is going to look a lot better. I do think the flip side of that is, obviously if you have a product or if you have something that is supposed to be out in the winter, that doesn't mean shoot it in the spring or the summer. There are times that we will want to use the winter or the fall. But I do think I keep saying spring and summer, but this does extend to the fall too, because there is a time you want fall foliage and you want those colors. So I think these are all things, I guess, to consider, as well as what are you trying to achieve in your story? What are you trying to achieve in terms of the time of year and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, fall shoots look fantastic. I mean, the leaves are beautiful, but it does maybe date your video a little bit if you're showing it maybe in the spring or a different time. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe you're doing a case study and it's you get some nice footage and it's fine that you can tell that it's not the current season. So, like you said, you just kind of think about where your video is going to be used and what you're trying to achieve, and if the background kind of matters or not.
I do think the seasons are a great way to showcase time in a video, because you might be showing, maybe you'll shoot something in the spring, you're showing whatever it is, a piece of equipment or somebody doing something in the spring, the summer, the fall, and even into the winter. It's a great way to show time passing, or even just the versatility of something. So that might be something to consider with a corporate video. So those are all great things, but I think outside of those, I know this seems very simple, but outside of those, there are some things that do make it a little harder to work outside, or maybe outside's not the best option. And I think that the one thing I really want to start off with, just because when you were mentioning dating your videos, kind of got me thinking about it. One thing to think about is drone footage of cities or buildings or different landscapes that can possibly change. And I think a great example of this right now is here in the city of Cleveland. They're building the new Sherwin-Williams headquarters downtown. That's still in process. There's still a crane up. And that's something to really think about, that if you go and you capture footage of a city and then the skyline changes or the name of the stadium changes, they took First Energy off the Browns Stadium, the Indians went to the Guardians, all these things change, you all of a sudden lose that footage. You can no longer use it. It's dated, and people know that it's different. So that's one thing to consider, that you might be spending money on something that you might not be able to use. So it's important to really understand what's going on in your landscape.
Absolutely. I mean, there may be some times where, maybe you're going to use a video for a little bit and then you have some new things that you want to change or add to or whatever. You can always swap in new shots. But of course, that's going to take more time and resources and everything. So you always want your video to, last as long as you can, maximize your investment. But so what are some let's maybe talk about the sun, because
Okay.
these were some things that I learned, once I got into video. I think there's a kind of misconception that if it's a sunny day, it's a great day for photos and video, and that's not always the case.
Yes. So I think with that, we often get this where we'll go on, like you're saying, like we'll go out on location and the client goes, oh, well, it's a cloudy, it's an overcast day, so it's not a good day.
That's
And
true.
we
Oh,
always
yeah.
say, it's a great day, actually.
Yeah, they're
It-
like disappointed, and we're like, no, this is great.
this is perfect for
Yeah.
us. And I think a lot of that has to do with, if you think about the sun as a light, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. Either Josh and I have talked about it, or Najada and I have talked about it. But when you think about the sun as a light source, whenever we use a light, for what we're doing, there's never one light. There's always multiple lights, and there's reflectors, and there's ways to modify and control those lights. And what the difference is there is we can turn a light on and off if we have it, but with the sun, we can't really do that. So that really requires us to, if it's a sunny day, to bring additional lighting that is going to be more expensive because it's a higher output light. So lights that are like probably anywhere to purchase from $1,200 up, or to rent could be a couple $100s a day to be able to have for that shoot. And then outside of that lighting and the stands that go with it, which is a whole other expense, you're also going to need stands to hold modifiers. So we're going to need a diffuse light. We'll have to try and diffuse the sun. We may have to try and have like negative fill, so ways to block that light and then shape the light. We may have to also like consider like where we're setting up the scene. So we may have to move the scene depending on the time of day. So we can't, get the scene set up necessarily and leave it there all day, because as the sun starts to move, we have to start changing and making adjustments to try and make the shot look, the way it's supposed to look and not look blown out, because that is something that you have to worry about with the sun. Is you could have blown out light, so it could be very bright, and then you can't make out the detail. Or another thing is it might look like there might be more shadows, because depending on where the sun is positioned and the time of day, and things could look very flat and not looking as dynamic as they could, like when we're trying to shape light and trying to light for a subject.
Yeah, and all of those, changes we can kind of work with, if we're doing a one shot in one place for a short period. But like you said, if we do 3 interviews over the course of 3 hours, then each interview lighting is going to look different. So there's, some things that we have to do to kind of minimize that. But just some things to think about.
Yeah, I think they're things that are important aspects, because in terms of production, because what ends up happening often is like we'll have to give a quote to a client, and some clients trust us as the expert to if this is what you think it takes to achieve the shot, then okay, let's do it. And then some clients really want more of an explanation. Well, why why is it going to cost this much? I could set my iPhone outside and get a shot that will look, however it looks, and they think like, they don't have that issue. And the one thing to think about with the iPhone is it is automatically adjusting and doing things to try and prevent that from happening. But also the quality of the footage that you're going to get is going to be very different than what you're getting from a professional camera. You're not going to be able to get the blurred background, the bokeh. You're not going to be able to get with your phone necessarily, at least not the way that you would from the camera. You might not be able to get the detail that you can get in a camera, or the resolution that you would get in like a professional camera. So these are things that we have to account for. Our sensor doesn't automatically adjust like your phone does. So that's one important aspect. So oftentimes it requires more than just what you might think. The biggest thing we're trying to avoid happening is you don't want to get set up, and then all of a sudden, like, you're all set up, you're good to go, you start recording, and then the sun ends up in your shot, or messes with your shot somehow to the point that you can't, like I said before, you can't turn the sun off. And so the problem then becomes that, you don't want to, it's going to add time to the shoot. So not only is it going to delay what we're doing, but it's going to delay what the client's going to get done. And then we might not be able to achieve everything in that day or those 2 days, depending on what's going on. And then that results in extra costs for us that we either have to eat or we have to charge the client, because we didn't, going into this, maybe we didn't know or they didn't know. So we try to like eliminate all those surprises, really. I mean, that's the biggest thing I'd say, is understanding like how the lighting can change. If it's the lighting inside a facility, it's as simple as turning it off. Maybe sometimes that's not as simple, because we maybe can't turn it off. Sometimes there's night lights that you just can't turn them off. But when you have the sun that comes in through a window, or if the sun is directly on your subject, maybe it ends up peeking through like over the building and you weren't expecting that and you were trying to use shadow from the building or something like that, it makes it where you have to tear everything down and move it. And if it's just you, a camera, and a couple modifiers, it's kind of a pain. But oftentimes, depending on what you're trying to do, like clients have these big expectations, and it may result in having a couple lights, a couple modifiers, and then those things are on stands and there's sandbags, and then there's the camera set up. Maybe it's a 2-camera setup. You're doing an interview, and it's like you basically have to, like, everything that you did to prepare for that might have taken an hour and a half, and you just have to like throw all that out and then move somewhere else because you just can't stop the sun from coming in.
Yeah. So there's really there's a lot of things to be thinking about, and the important thing, I guess, is just to be communicating with your video team about what kind of spot or time of day, or to kind of maybe set your realistic expectations for what may work.
This goes back to the episode where we talked about site visits and why site visits are so crucial. We did a shoot last year. We were going to be on site for 3 days, and the first thing Josh did, there was a set of windows, and the first thing he did was use his phone to see where the sun was going to be and then how that sun was going to affect our shoot. And we were able to bring something with us. We brought like a whole couple stands and some blankets, and we were able to hoist them up to block the sunlight. That way we could continue to work and it wouldn't affect our shot. And then we also had to account for the fact that there were windows along the whole wall. And then we noticed as time went on that we had to blast more light at the background because that sun would make its way down and it would end up in the back of our shot, because we can't block every window. But at least we didn't have that in the budget. But that's the big thing, is it's like, if you watch how a movie's made and they have to shoot stuff outside, I mean, they have massive lights, they have massive diffusers, they have large equipment that they're hoisting up with lifts and things like that just so they can control the sun. So it's you can't assume just because we're making a short video or it's for a small product, or maybe we're just doing an interview, that you would need anything less. We just probably need it at the scale for what we're doing.
Yeah, so that's good to understand that the sun can not only affect your outdoor shoots but also your indoor shoots. But then there's other elements of weather too to consider, when you're outside. Like, I know wind can really affect audio, for instance.
Wind can affect audio. Wind could also affect, if you're using these stands and you put sandbags on them, we were doing that shoot a couple years ago out in Amherst, and we had that big stand and we had those sandbags on it, and there was 2 of us that really had to move that big diffusion, so we had that huge 8 foot by 8 foot diffuser, and it ends up just becoming like a sail, pretty much. If you think of a sailboat, and it can just take it and then just knock it down, and then that could cause damage to the equipment. It could land on a car or a person and cause damage that way. It could cause property damage. So there's things to consider with that. Also with the wind, a lot of people want to fly drone. That's another consideration. When you fly drone, is if it's too windy, the drone gets moved all over the place. The gimbal can't stay as steady. You can't do the same moves that you might be able to do. The smaller the drone, I feel like the more the wind affects it. The larger the drone, the stronger the propellers, the more you can kind of keep it going in a higher wind. But that's a whole other consideration too. And then even with the wind, if it's a partly cloudy day, the wind moves the clouds. The clouds are moving, or these things are moving through, and that's a consideration, because you might get a shot set up and it looks great in the sun. You're using the sun, and then all of a sudden a big cloud drifts in front of the sun, and now it's dark, and you have to readjust all your lighting, and that makes for a tough shoot where you're trying to be consistent. If you're trying to have a consistent background for interviews or a consistent, setup for products, it really is hard to navigate that. So it's better to have an overcast day because of the diffusion. It's better to have just a bright blue sky sunny day in that case, because then you can do things to try and combat the sun. But if you have clouds ducking in and out, it makes it hard for drones too. We've tried to get drone footage of buildings on a partly cloudy day, and you'll get the perfect movement, and you're coming across the building, and all of a sudden that cloud just shifts in front of the sun, and then it just gets dark all of a sudden, and then you have to throw that shot out and start again.
Yeah, so there's definitely challenges. I guess I kind of maybe want to leave some, our listeners with just some steps to, think about, what they can do if they are thinking about an outdoor shoot. Because, while there are a lot of challenges, I don't want to dissuade people from, having outdoor shoots. So we've had many successful outdoor shoots, and even just getting some shots outside, and then, doing maybe some other things inside. So I would think, for one, maybe have like a backup day, like
Yes.
a rain day, but maybe
Yes.
it could be a wind day or a Sunday or
Yeah.
something else. You want to maybe have another date in mind.
Yeah, so like all of our clients, we always do that. We always have a backup day. And then sometimes you want to have a backup day for your backup day, depending on how pivotal the shoot is. So like you might say, this is the day we're shooting for. And then if that doesn't work out, we're going to go to this day. And if that doesn't work out, we'll go to this day. So like just having a couple dates, or even saying like, like if you have the flexibility to say, we're actually open all week. So can we just plan accordingly as the week gets here? And then we can maybe, if we have the availability, I think that's the big thing. We could say, okay, yeah, let us look at that week and see what happens. If it is a couple pickup shots, like you're saying, like maybe we just need a few pieces of B-roll, like we could always try and, slate it for a couple hours in the afternoon. We're just going to run out and get that and bring some stuff with us. But that is one thing to consider, is like having those days and being flexible so you can like have the time to get that. Don't schedule one day and that product that you want to shoot is only in your, like only at your facility that one day, because you might be disappointed if that's the day that's, a thunderstorm or a snowstorm or, whatever that may be. I would say the other tip that I would consider if you're going to shoot outside is just allot for enough time. Like understand that just because you can take this out and you can get what you think is really good footage doesn't mean that to have it professionally shot, it's as simple as just running a camera out there. So allot for the time, ask, a professional, like, what is this going to take? Look at your shots realistically, understand with that, like a good professional is going to take you through. It's going to take us a full day because of X, Y, Z. And maybe it's the sun at noon is going to be here. We're going to break. We're going to get lunch. We'll come back at 1. And then, because it's not always great to shoot directly with the sun overhead. And then just figuring out how to make that work. So a lot for enough time. And then I would say tip number 3, I would even think with this is if it's going to be a partly cloudy day, I would just like scrap that. I would just try and go for overcast or a sunny day. So just like look at the weather and understand that like if you're planning this out, like because let's say you're specifically planning this, if you see it's going to be partly cloudy, don't pick that day.
Because partly cloudy means too much change. At least if it's sunny, it's sunny. If it's overcast, it's overcast. But the cloudy can really, there's too much variability there.
And I would throw this last tip in, the tip 4 for people that like if you need drone shots done, and usually the experts will do this, but check and see if you have any drone restrictions, because that's always a big thing that people don't think about. Like how close are you to the airport? How close are you to government property? Like the national parks, you can't fly through the national parks. So like looking at stuff like that and understanding like, can I still fly? And it may not even be a restriction for, like a specific restriction. It could be a rotating restriction. Like, for example, is the president coming into town? That's something to think about. Like that will shut down air traffic. Is there going to be an air show? We had that. There was an air show. We were down and we were too close. So they changed like the restrictions based on what's going on, and it's all out of safety. So make sure, just don't go in and say we want a drone shot and then just assume it can happen. It might not be able to.
Yeah, and your video professional, again, if they know what they're doing, like should make a best effort to look into that as well for you. But how would a person check on some of those things?
You can look just by, there's flight charts, so you can look at the flight charts and see like there's things you can look at. There's also an app that we use called I believe it's called the Fly More app. I'm double checking that.
Because I would imagine that, some people might be like, they won't see us, but
Yes.
but you really don't want to play around with it because penalties can be pretty steep, right?
Well, it's called Before You Fly. And
Okay.
if you're using a DJI drone, it won't even take off. Like it's using like current flight data.
Is DJI a brand?
Yes.
Okay.
So like that one, for example, like for us when we had that where there was the air show, it wouldn't even take off. Like it would just grounded.
It has those restrictions embedded in the system.
And you can go with the Before You Fly. I'm pretty sure you can not only put in your location, but you can put in the day and see what's going on. So it's not like you have to wait till the day of to find out. That goes back to a site visit. And then one last thing I would just like to throw out there too. I know we've kind of like covered 4 tips, but this is kind of like more of an indoor shooting tip. But if there are windows in your facility, make sure you tell your videographer. Like if there's going to be windows where you're going to be shooting, Oftentimes we hear things like, oh, well, this is great, like, because there's a lot of natural light coming in. So, like, there's a window in this shot, and we're like, this is a nightmare because now we have to utilize this natural light in some way or block it out completely. So.
Yeah, natural light is good for living and working, but not necessarily for video shooting. Yes.
So those are 5 things that you definitely want to consider.
Okay, well, and with that, outdoor shoots are possible with the right planning, so pay attention to those tips, and your video partner can definitely help you make a successful shoot. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening to Watch Time. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode.
And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.
And if you want your question answered on our podcast, go to flexmediacle.com/watchtime.